Happy Wednesday, everybody. My name is Dana Neeson. If you are just now finding this channel, I run a telesales team for Taylor Legacy. We sell final expense insurance over the phone with one carrier. My job is to help you have stronger, more sophisticated conversations. Yesterday, I spent over an hour recording some content of a call review in which I helped an agent close his very first sale. When I went to go edit it, I realized my audio wasn't working. So we're doing a refresh, a restart today, and here's a little bit of information about this call and why you might want to listen to it. So the owner of the policy was a former life insurance agent who had 25 years in the business selling primarily term insurance. She was looking for a policy for her 51-year-old son who has epilepsy, and she found that she kept getting declined. And even the ones that weren't declining her were probably too expensive, more than she wanted to spend. So she really is in this world of not really understanding what the best option would be for her son. This was a scheduled callback. The agent intended to have someone from the management team help him to get through this. This was probably a little bit of a more difficult call to have for someone that doesn't have any experience or perspective. So I am happy to bring this call to you today. We will pause it throughout and interject with observation and discussion, and I hope you learned something. As always, if you find value in this video, please give it a like, as well as if you learned something, post a comment so I can know. I love to interact with this community, but more importantly, I want to know that what we're providing is actually helping you. It motivates me to keep going and to keep providing more and more content just like this. So get out your notebook and your pen, make sure you take notes and actively engage while you listen along. That will always be the best way to learn.
Hello, Karen. How you doing?
Pretty good.
This is David. This is David calling you back.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Everything go okay at the doctor's, I hope?
Yes, it did. Took us a little
Good.
while, but yes, everything went
Yeah.
fine.
All right. What I'd like to do now is bring on Dana. She's one of our head underwriters, and she can go through this with us, and that way we can make sure we do it 100% correctly and get you and Michael the coverage you need at the best price. Does that sound fair?
That sounds fair.
I happen to be able to barge right into your call, so I'm here to help.
Excellent. Thank you, Dana. I knew you could handle that. Okay, Dana, we have Karen on the line. She is interested in coverage for her son, Michael, who's 52 years old. He does have epilepsy. Karen's been in the insurance industry for a while, so she knows what she's talking about, and I'll let you go from there.
Okay. Hi, Karen. How are you today?
I'm fine, Dana. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Anything I can do to help, I'm happy to try my best. So I'm going to ask you a few questions so that I can get caught up to speed with where you're at prior to getting on the phone with us, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the policies that you have been declined for up until now have been larger, possibly term policies or IULs or something more significant than what a final expense policy could provide?
Term.
Correct, term. Okay. That's typically the reason that that people would get declined for, even for something like epilepsy. What expenses are you mostly concerned about your son's policy paying for if something were to happen to him?
Just final expenses, all I'm interested in.
Okay, so let's just talk about those questions first. Of course, I already knew that she was having problems getting a policy, but typically if you're looking for a final expense policy, you're not going to really have a hard time getting declined. So it's really important, especially for new agents, to know that if someone has gotten declined for something that should just cover final expenses, that shouldn't be the reason that has stopped them from getting it. Normally, it's more like it's too expensive. So my next question, which would be, what expenses are you concerned about your son's policy paying for if something were to happen to him, is to help me understand if she really is looking for a larger policy than what a final expense policy could provide. And therefore, I could start helping her when I get to education, understanding why that may not be an option at this point, and kind of taking her from coverage expectations of here kind of down to here and make sure she's okay with that. But the fact that she just told me all she wants it for is to cover final expenses, then that's perfect. That's the information I needed to know.
Oh, okay. So I'm just curious, what had you wanting to apply for term insurance if you were wanting something to cover final expenses?
That's what I was marketing. That's
what you were marketing.
That's the industry I was in, yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's understandable. So, how long were you in it for?
About 25 years.
Okay. So I want you to pay attention to the clarifying question that I asked, because clarifying questions seem to be a very difficult thing for a lot of agents to do. And the best way to have clarifying questions become natural for you is if you just have a curious embodiment. Like you are just curious about everything all the time and you want to ask questions to understand more, or why someone is making the decisions they're making. So when she told me that she was only looking for final expenses, I didn't just take that and run with it. I wanted to understand, oh, okay, well, why would you look for a temporary policy if you were wanting to take care of something that you could possibly outlive? Like, I really wanted to know that and understand that. That is a perfect example of a clarifying question. And that's how I even uncovered that she was a life insurance agent for 25 years to begin with. Had I not asked that, I don't know if it would have ever come up. Maybe in education it would have come up, but the sooner I can find things out, the better, because it changes the direction of how I speak to someone.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. How long have you been out now?
Since 2009.
2009. Okay, so it's been a minute. So I certainly don't have to help you understand the difference between term and whole life.
No, ma'am.
But most people who are looking to get a policy for final expenses want a small whole life policy because it never cancels or goes up in price. I'm going to guess you were probably more attracted to term because it's cheaper, you can get more coverage, and it probably makes more financial sense. Am I on the right track with that?
You're right on. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. This isn't my first rodeo either. So, so the thing is that
What did I just do there, by the way? I confirmed and understood why she would be attracted to a policy like that, especially with all the experience she has. That's all she knows, but she also knows that you can get a lot more coverage for a lot less money.
really going to be your only option at this point. And I'm happy to go through with you what those numbers might be and what that might look like for you, if you're open to that conversation.
Okay, I kind of have I'd like to go with just the least amount that is possible. 25,000 is all I'm interested in. And I'd just like to see what that
even more than you need.
I'm sorry?
If something were to happen, I said that's probably even more than you need, and we're going to talk about that too. Are you wanting a traditional burial for your son or a cremation?
Well, we haven't talked about that. That obviously would be his decision, yes. But I just in 2018 I buried my husband, and I ended up, well, I had term on him, and it
Yeah.
ended up costing the burial itself, but covering everything. It ended up costing me about $15,000, and that was in 2018.
Okay.
So
Thank you for sharing that.
now we did go a little overboard, but I'm thinking 15 to 20 probably.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take this a little bit step further, because now that you know a whole life policy is probably the route you're going to have to go in, we're going to limit the coverage to keep it affordable. But there's probably some things that you don't know about how life insurance for these types of policies work when it comes to paying out, and what makes Lincoln Heritage a little bit different when it comes to funeral coverage. And that might help you feel more comfortable in making a decision whenever you're ready. Would that be okay?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about what we just heard over the last couple of minutes. First of all, in listening to this back, I probably could have done a better job in summarizing the information she just gave me and making sure that I understood it. I probably should have said, like, I internalized it. I heard what she said, but in order for someone to feel validated that you did hear the information, I probably could have done a better job there and said something like, so if I am understanding you correctly, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you had to bury your husband, but at that time in 2008, or 2018, I can't even remember now. This is why active listening and writing everything down is so important. When you had to bury him, it cost you $15,000, even though you went a little bit overboard, and you're probably worried that because of inflation, or from the time your husband passed to the time your son might pass, it's going to be more than it was even then. And that's why you're thinking you might need 20 or possibly even 25. Did I get that right? I definitely should have done that. And I want to mention that because that is an important part. Like, validating somebody's reasons for why they think they need something is an important part of the sales process, and it'll help them lean into you as someone who really does listen and someone who cares about getting them the results that they want. So I should have done that. However, what I also just did in my transition into explaining what Lincoln Heritage provides in their value add, which is the free membership to the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society, I want you to really understand how I did that. And I said, so now that you know that a whole life policy is more appropriate, is what you need, there are a few other things that you probably don't know about what's going to happen to this policy when you pass away. And it might be important for you to understand that. So while you're figuring out which direction you want to go, or when you're ready to make a decision, you have all the information that you need. Would that be okay? Right. So I'm transitioning to another section by saying, hey, there might be a few things you don't know or don't understand, and the impact that might have on your kids. Before you rush to make a decision, you should probably know this too. Would that be okay if I help you understand that? What that does is create curiosity, and it gives you buy-in to kind of go into the next section. And one of the things that I've been talking to the team a lot about recently is making your transitions from section to section almost like the trailer to a movie. And when we are sitting in a movie theater and the first 10 minutes are just previews and trailers to movies that are not yet out, what are they intended to do? They are intended to get us excited and motivated and curious to want to see the movie when it comes out. And if you can present your transition statements like a movie trailer, it will re-engage and reignite the conversation, because they'll want to hear what comes next. They'll want to hear what you have to say and why that's so important. So oftentimes when I'm transitioning from discovery to education, especially if they spoke to other people before, because I would say well over 90% of the people that we talk to don't know the difference between term and whole life. So when I transition and I happen to say, we only provide permanent whole life policies as opposed to term, hey, do you happen to know the difference between the two? Or has anyone ever explained that to you before? And they say no. If they've talked to other people and haven't made a decision yet, you guys, this is such a golden moment for you. Really? You mean you've talked to other people about putting something in place and nobody has helped you understand this yet? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, this is really, really important because if you don't understand the differences here, and you might accidentally buy a policy that isn't even going to be there for your kids when you pass away. This is really important. So let's take a moment and make sure you understand it so that you're comfortable when you're ready to make a decision. Okay. I'm over dramatizing this. This is my trailer to the next section so that it doesn't feel like one long script that is boring and puts people to sleep. You can think of each section independently as its own little movie, and you're providing the trailer to the movie before you start. You get that buy-in, you get them re-engaged. Same thing from education to FCGS or any other value add that you have on top of just the policy itself. Okay, so now that you understand that a small whole life policy is what you're looking for, there are actually, hundreds of companies that can offer you a whole life policy. And because we're all federally regulated, you'll find that we're all going to be about the same price, give or take. But because I know you wanted to take care of funeral expenses, now there are some really important factors that have to go into this decision when it comes to what's going to happen to this policy when you pass away and how it's going to impact your kids. Can we talk about that next? Just to make sure that you, are totally educated, right? So I'm like creating a little bit of fear in buying the wrong policy, fear in buying a policy that might not be there for their kids. And now I'm creating fear. And well, if you don't know this could have a negative impact on your kid. So I'm, again, reigniting that curiosity from my customer. So I kind of hit the restart button and get them re-engaged. Okay. That's a little nugget, super important that you do.
So, when your husband passed, and I know it's been a while and you were probably in a fog all as it was, do you remember how long it took for you to get his death certificate?
The death certificate.
Yes.
I'm going to say 2 weeks. I don't think I waited a terribly long time.
Yeah, 2 weeks sounds about right. That's about, during COVID, it was taking months, but 2 weeks is typically the average. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is because you probably have at least a general understanding that because there's that 2 week delay in getting a death certificate, that's when you're able to even file the claim, right, for the life insurance. And then from there, it takes another week or two to get paid. So typically families are looking at a time frame between 4 to 6 weeks to get paid out. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when it comes to paying for final expenses or funerals, a lot of times families just don't have that kind of time. And a lot of the funeral directors need to get payment now before they even remove a body or before they even get started. And so we work with a nonprofit organization called the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society. It was founded by a family of ex-funeral directors who kind of saw the problem with the time frame for payout when it came to paying for funerals. And so what they do in partnership with Lincoln Heritage is they have the ability to advance the money from your policy that you need to pay these immediate expenses before the death certificate is even received. I mean, they've even paid claims in under 1 hour before.
Oh, wow.
Then you get the death certificate. The claims process is still the same with Lincoln Heritage, just as it would be with any other carrier. And then once that claim gets approved, the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society gets reimbursed. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it does, actually.
So if your family had the ability possibly to get paid within hours of your son's passing, as opposed to that 4 to 6 week time frame. Is that something you think would be helpful for you?
Yes, absolutely. No. Yeah. And like I told David, it's not my first rodeo either. Is this and it's sort of a caveat, but does it cost extra?
I love how you think, and no, it is free.
Okay.
It is
all right, great. I love free.
It is a nonprofit organization. Yeah, and I implore you to go to the Lincoln Heritage website, click on I think they call it funeral, lhlic.com. It is program details, and then what is the funeral advantage. And there's some videos on there about what the FCGS does for families and all sorts of resources that you can look at. But that's just part one.
Okay. So that was kind of a longer section there. And so what we do in the first part of FCGS in like our problem awareness is trying to talk about a problem, which is time frame for payout. And typically I just ask people, do you have any idea how long it takes to get a death certificate? Or I'll say, what's the first thing that you need in order to even file a claim for life insurance when someone passes? Now, because she had an experience with her husband, I'm just going to use that. Right? Because the more information you can use and draw in from your customer story, the more relevant it's going to be to them and the more engaged they're going to be. So I'm always going to be bringing it back to her husband and her experience with her husband throughout the rest of this conversation. And the first thing I wanted to know was how long it took for them to get the death certificate. 2 weeks is a pretty common time frame, and that's all I need, right? Because even 2 weeks is too long. A lot of funeral homes won't do anything until they get some sort of payment. And another question I could have asked, in addition to, do you like the solution? I could have asked a question about, so if you were put in a position where you had to wait 4 to 6 weeks to get paid out, would you have the ability, or would it be easy for you to come up with the funds that you might need to get the process started? That's a really good question because it would confirm the problem. Well, and I don't know what she would have said because I didn't ask, right? So that's another thing that I missed that I probably should have done. And typically people are inquiring to protect a loved one. She was inquiring to protect herself if something were to happen to her son. So the way that I would ask the question would be slightly different. But when you ask that type of question about how would that affect your kids or how would that affect your family? So if your kids were left in a position where they were asked to come out of pocket with money because it was going to take 4 to 6 weeks to get the life insurance money, would they be able to? Right? Confirming the problem, because the more your customers understand that this is in fact a problem, the more impactful and meaningful your solution will be.
So part one is that expedited payment, so that still no one has to come out of pocket while they wait to get reimbursed. Because the other thing that could happen, not always the case, but sometimes funeral homes will try to get assignment of the policy, right? So that you don't have to come out of pocket, but they are charging anywhere from a 5% to a 20% assignment fee for that, which comes right out of your life insurance policy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So you would avoid all of that and just work with the FCGS on that if it's something that you needed. The second thing that they'll do is, because they were founded by ex-funeral directors, it was actually the Kraft family. They've been in this industry going back to the 1800s, and in the late 80s, early 90s, they sold their family's funeral home to SCI, which is one of the largest conglomerates in the country right now, that just started charging these big markups and unfortunately take advantage of grieving families when they're not in the right state of mind. And what they do is work hand in hand with you to review your contract and advise you on where you may be overpaying They can buy things like the casket from third-party providers. And because of the funeral law that was passed a long time ago, the funeral homes can't charge a fee to receive it. They have to remove of all the packaging that came with it. And we have the power to help negotiate when you are not in the right state of mind to do that. So like a casket, for example, if that's the direction that you guys decide to go, as you did with your husband, there's a really popular casket right now that's a light blue 18 gauge steel batesville casket, and the funeral homes are typically charging anywhere from about, I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000 for this casket. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Ours was a little bit more than that, but ours was a wood, it looked like it was wood. And it was sort of Western in style. So, yeah, like I said, we went above and beyond on his casket because he was a cowboy and we wanted him buried as a cowboy. So,
right.
But that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with all the embellishments that you just described, which, you know, is totally a reasonable thing to want to get to remember him. Do you have any idea how much this casket costs the funeral home to buy before they sell it to you?
If what? I'm sorry.
Take a guess at how much you think it costs the funeral home to buy it for.
Oh, I'm thinking probably maybe $1,000.
Yeah, you would be very close on the Price is Right, about $900. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can buy.
Wow, that is a markup.
Casket. Yeah. At cost. Ship it to any funeral home in the country with next day air for about $1,600. And that's not even where it ends. They'll go line item by line item. We've found double taxes before where people were charging almost 30% on taxes on the whole funeral when legally you can only charge tax on the hardware itself. They'll look at, limousine charges, funeral director's fee, transportation costs. I mean, did your husband pass away in a hospital or at his home?
In hospital.
In a hospital, okay. So let's pretend your son has a seizure and passes away at home. I'm just saying that's the case. And first responders come and they're the ones that have to make the phone call to the funeral home to arrange transportation. You probably don't know this because you know funeral law, but legally the funeral home cannot charge you now for those transportation costs because you weren't the one that authorized that transportation. But these are the things that the FCGS look at. They look at what you should legally be charged, what you shouldn't be, what you're getting overcharged for, the headstone, the flowers, everything. And let me look up actually in your area, FCGS. Let me give you the estimate tool. You're in 77625?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, 1 second. Entering my verification code. All right, zip code 77625. I'm just gonna hit yes to a burial, yes to a service celebrating life. And do you already own a cemetery property for your son, or would that have to be purchased?
No, that'll have to be purchased.
You don't, okay. All right, so in your area, God, I wish I could send you a picture of this. In your area with a graveside service, would you do a graveside service or like a visitation wake?
We'll do probably graveside. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So it says potential out-of-pocket expense without FCGS services is showing $11,290. Average FCGS estimate, which does not include the cost of the cemetery property, and neither did the other, was $3,250.
Get out. That is amazing.
I swear.
So we have this really cool tool that the Funeral Consumer Guardian Society gives us access to, which is a funeral estimate tool. And what this tool allows us to do is type in any zip code or any city and state in the country. And because it has access to over 30,000 price lists of funeral homes in the country, it will give us an estimate of what it would cost in that area for cremation, burial, service, visitation, wake, like all that stuff. And it will pull up what the potential out-of-pocket expenses are. And it, because it also has a database of other funeral homes or places in the area that are cheaper, even if it has to go a little bit of a mile radius to find something less expensive, it also stores a database of what we have been able to get things down for in those specific areas. And this has been accumulating data for years and years, and it is very accurate. And this tool looks like this. And it allows us to put in a zip code, which is what I did in this example. And if I were to, let's see, let's find a zip code for Texas, Dallas zip code. So 75266. So if I were to put in 75266 and I said cremation with a service celebrating life, and I hit submit, the potential out-of-pocket expenses without FCGS is $9,100. The average FCGS estimate is $2,650. Here are some things to keep in mind, right? It's important for FCGS price shopping is important for a memorial cremation. Prices vary greatly from funeral home to funeral home. We recommend going with a direct cremation and doing the memorial service outside of the funeral home. Funeral homes often charge $1,500 plus just for the service. Contract review is important because memorial cremation, many times they will add charges to increase the contract amount. The contract can often be confusing to consumers, and overpriced merchandise can be overlooked by grieving families. They have the assignment service to make sure that families do not have to come out of pocket for additional charges or other cash advanced items. This is especially important with cremation, as oftentimes discount crematories want payment before they will even do the removal. Your beneficiary will have control of the proceeds to be used for any bills, not just charges at the funeral home. Okay, so that's what I'm referencing right now as I'm going over the differences in cost.
Wow.
So the thing that is so important, because you have gone through this, and I've only gone through this with my grandmother, but you know, in that moment when you've just lost a person you've spent decades with, not only are you not even thinking about the cost of things compared to other funeral homes, like who's going to shop around for their husband or son's funeral? It's just not, It's weird, right? So when you get your policy from Lincoln, they will send you a final wishes guide and 5 ID cards. So in that final wishes guide from the Guardian Society, whenever you and your son decide, and I could even do this comparison for cremation if you're curious about what the difference in cost would be.
Yes.
Done that? Yeah. Okay, let me do that really quick. I'm just going to say cremation with a service celebrating life. Would that be fair?
That'd be, yeah.
Okay. So potential out-of-pocket expense without FCGS services, $9,109. Average FCGS estimate, $2,650.
Wow.
Okay. So you're going to send that final wishes guide back to us. So we store that policy, or we store those details with the policy information for your son. So when we get the call, right now we already know what to do to help you. We're going to call the funeral home on your behalf, let them know you had the policy. We're not going to tell them how much it's worth. And then by law, they have to send you an invoice for what they're going to charge you. And you can just text that copy of that invoice right over to them, and they're going to advise you on what to do and where to go in that moment to make sure that all you have to worry about is getting the family together and, you know, celebrating the life of your son. and there is no cost for this service.
That's amazing. I love that.
Good. I'm so glad
I've
you
never
feel that
heard
way.
of this is, yes.
So she just said something really, really important that caused me to say what I'm about to say next. And you might not have even catched it or caught it, the right tense here. She just gave me an objection, by the way, which if you didn't catch it, you could even rewind a little bit and listen for it before I tell you what the objection was. So if you want to do that now, rewind and listen to that last 30 seconds again. She just said, I'd never heard of anything like this before. Okay, so that is an objection in disguise, because now she may, or what I'm trying to prevent is an objection of, I want to do research on this. I want to make sure it's legit. I want to look around and, reconfirm that the thing she's never heard about before is real. Because all we have is her voice. I can't even show her any pamphlets unless I physically make her go online and look at it. She just has to trust that what I'm telling her is correct. And so what I'm about to say here is kind of reconfirming why she hasn't heard of it before.
It's amazing.
You really have ever heard of it if you are just working with term insurance, right? You're dealing with like mortgage protection and probably people that are trying to protect larger assets and probably very, very little end of life. Yeah. So it wouldn't be something that would have come up. Yeah. And this is all we do. This is the only thing that we do. Did you ever watch the movie The Burial on Netflix?
I haven't, no. I've heard of it, but I've not watched it,
it's
no.
Still on. Yeah, it's with Jamie Foxx and who else is in that? Jamie Foxx and someone else. And it's a true story about basically what I'm talking about, how the corporations were buying up these family-run funeral homes for profit, and they're still unregulated to this day. I mean, it's so bad, and I could go on and on and on about this, so you probably regret getting me on the call, but it's so bad that the National Funeral Director Association created a lobby group that works with the funeral rules. So every time a funeral home gets reported that they did not abide by the funeral rule, all they have to do is pay a $2,000 fine to the FTC, take a course, and then the FTC covers it up as if it never happened. I mean, there's so much corruption that goes on that you need, like, you don't know what you don't know. And if we could provide any value to help make that day a little bit easier for you, I mean, that's why we're here. So it's, do you think this might be the answer for you?
Yes, ma'am. It sounds very good. Very, very good.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to ask the health questions about your son. I honestly don't think you need 20 to 25,000. I would probably end up recommending to start somewhere maybe between 10 to 15 or even less, because if you decide to go the cremation route, you're really only going to need like a $5,000 policy, maybe $8,000. And then you can always get more if you decide that he wants to do a burial.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Then you're really like being conservative on the investment.
So what I did there is also knowing that she was originally attracted to term, which is cheaper. I already know that a $20,000 to $25,000 policy is probably going to be more than she wants to spend. And because I have the ability to reduce the cost of the final expenses, I can justify why getting a lower policy would be a better decision for her. And look, even if I didn't have something like the FCGS in my back pocket that I know for a fact helps families every day, I would still be justifying that she should be looking at a smaller policy just simply for the fact that we need to make sure it's affordable, and any amount of coverage that she has to help with the final expenses for her son is going to be better than nothing at all, and really doing a good job in education to make sure she understands that from company to company, it's really going to be similar in pricing, especially if he ends up being final expense, which he was. Didn't have no significant health conditions that would make him have a 2-year waiting period or any higher coverage amounts. And so we ended up offering the $10,000 policy, which ended up being like $43 a month. And she declined the AD&D coverage, which provides a significant amount of coverage. It's not just double indemnity. And that's the one she chose and went forward with. I had zero objections, zero hesitation to provide sensitive information, banking information, and she was super happy and grateful that we helped her understand and educate her on what her options were when it came to this. Some of the other stuff she didn't know about when it came to the funeral stuff. And we now have a very happy, satisfied client who has so much more than just a death benefit. So that is the call review. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. Again, if you enjoyed it and you stayed all the way through with me today, please give it a like, post a comment, tell me what you learned. And as always, I will see you again with another educational video. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.